David was running late. The clock on the wall showed 8:12 a.m., but he didn't even notice. He should have been at the interview by now, the one that could change everything for his family, the one job he had been waiting for, fighting for the past 2 years. But instead of walking into a polished conference room, he was speeding down the street in his old car, the engine sputtering in protest. His phone buzzed again. Another reminder. The interview was at 9, but something had come up. The call he received just minutes ago sent him on an unexpected detour. He slowed down as he approached the sidewalk. A woman stood there, frozen, staring at the road. Her hair, long and disheveled, blew in the morning wind. She looked lost, vulnerable, and in need of help. David could have kept going. He had a deadline to meet. His job interview waited, his future, but the voice in his head, the voice that always reminded him to do the right thing, won out. He rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" The woman's gaze snapped to him, her eyes wide, a mix of fear and relief. I need help. Please," she said, voice shaking. "My car broke down. My phone's dead. I don't know what to do." David glanced at his phone. It was already 8:20. He cursed under his breath, but there was no way he could leave her like this. "I'll help you. Don't worry," David said, giving her a reassuring smile. She stepped closer to his car, the tension in her shoulders loosening just slightly. He knew he should hurry. He couldn't afford to miss this chance, not after everything he had gone through. But something in the woman's eyes, a desperate kind of loneliness, pulled him in. They drove for about 15 minutes before the woman spoke again. "I'm sorry. I know this is asking a lot." "No problem. We'll figure it out," David said, though he could already feel his chances slipping away. He didn't want to come off as rude, but he had to get to that interview. She hesitated, staring at the road. "Actually, there's something I should tell you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. David frowned. "What is it?" She turned to face him, her gaze intense. "I'm a CEO. I run a company. And, well, I've been looking for someone like you." The words hit him like a ton of bricks. What do you mean?" She smiled, but it was a sad smile, one that made David uneasy. "You'll see. I've been looking for someone who can help me with a situation. You're not like the others." David felt his stomach tighten. The words she spoke were strange, cryptic, and he felt the weight of something important in the air. Something about her seemed off, but he couldn't put his finger on it. By the time they reached a secluded area where her car was parked, David realized that whatever was happening here wasn't going to be simple. He glanced at his phone. It was 8:50. The interview was only 10 minutes away. But then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed with a notification. The company he'd been hoping to join had sent an email. "We regret to inform you." His heart sank. The email had just arrived, and it was too late to make it. His dream job was slipping through his fingers, and yet, something told him this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far bigger. David stood there, phone in hand, staring at the email. "We regret to inform you." The words blurred together as the reality of what had just happened hit him. He was no longer in the running for his dream job. It was gone, just like that. The woman, who had introduced herself as Rachel, stood beside him, her expression unreadable. She hadn't said anything since they arrived at the parking lot, and the silence between them felt heavy. David was still processing what had just occurred, the loss of a future he had fought so hard for. He didn't know what to feel in disappointment, or something else. Was this a mistake? Should he have gone to the interview instead of helping her? He turned to Rachel. "I'm sorry." She held up her hand. "It's not your fault. I didn't mean for things to happen like this." Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. David looked at her, confused. "Then why are we here? You said you needed help. You're a CEO, right?" Rachel nodded, but there was a strange hesitation in her eyes. I'm the CEO of a major company, but the truth is, I've been looking for someone exactly like you. I wasn't expecting the job interview to be today, but maybe this was meant to happen." David shook his head. "Look, I don't understand. I was on my way to the biggest interview of my life, and now it's over. I don't know what you're talking about, but I can't just ignore the fact that I lost my chance." Rachel's expression softened, and she stepped closer to him. "David, I can offer you something far more important than that job. Something that could change everything for you." He frowned. "What could you possibly offer me?" "I just lost my dream job." She smiled faintly. "I can offer you an opportunity, a second chance, but it's not the kind of opportunity you might think. This is bigger than any job interview. What I'm asking, David, is if you're willing to work with me. I need someone I can trust. David felt a surge of emotion, confusion flooding his mind. How could she possibly be offering something more than the job he had just lost? He was a single dad, struggling to make ends meet, and he couldn't just walk away from the little he had left. But there was something about her, the way she spoke with such conviction, that made him pause. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Rachel's gaze held his, steady and unflinching. "I'm offering you a partnership, not just in business, but in something much deeper. I've been running this company for years, but there's something I've been hiding, something no one knows. And I need someone who understands what it means to be on the outside, someone who's been overlooked, underestimated, someone like you." David was stunned. He had no idea what she was getting at. "I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean, someone like me?" Rachel let out a sigh, her voice lowering as if she were about to reveal a secret she'd been keeping for years. "You see, David, I'm not just a CEO. I'm the heiress to a massive fortune. A fortune that's hidden in plain sight. And I have spent my life keeping it all a secret. But now, there's a situation that's far too dangerous for me to handle alone, and I need someone who can help me, someone who's not afraid of the truth." David's mind raced. What was she saying? A hidden fortune, dangerous situations. His head was spinning. He had just lost the most important job of his life, and now he was being asked to help a woman with a secret so big it could change everything. Before he could respond, Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly before putting it down, her face tightening. "I think it's time we had a conversation, but not here. This is bigger than both of us, and I need you to trust me. David, will you?" David's heart was pounding. Everything in him screamed to run, to get in his car and drive away from all this madness. But something in Rachel's eyes, a flicker of vulnerability mixed with something far darker, made him hesitate. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the dreams he had for their future. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. This could be the opportunity he'd been waiting for, even if he didn't understand it yet. He took a deep breath. "Okay," he said, his voice steady but uncertain. "I'll listen, but I need to know exactly what I'm getting into." Rachel nodded, her lips curling into a slight smile. "Good, I'll tell you everything, but not here. We need to go somewhere safe." David followed Rachel's car through the winding streets, his mind spinning with questions. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. A hidden fortune, dangerous situations, a CEO asking him of all people to work with her. The job he had lost seemed so distant now, like a small, fleeting thing compared to what he might be stepping into. The GPS on his phone blinked, guiding him to a secluded building on the outskirts of the city, far from the busy streets he was familiar with. When they arrived, Rachel led him inside, through a heavy iron door that felt more like an entrance to a fortress than a business office. The interior was stark, minimalistic, with walls of glass that offered a breathtaking view of the city's skyline. "You must have a lot of questions," Rachel said, leading him to a sleek, modern conference table. "I'll answer them, but first, I need you to understand something. What I'm asking you to do, it's not easy." David was still processing the situation, trying to wrap his head around everything. "You're telling me you're a billionaire. Why keep that a secret?" Rachel leaned against the table, her arms crossed. "It's not about the money, David. It's about power and control. I've spent my life building this company from the ground up, but there's a side of it no one knows. A side that's dangerous, and now, it's coming after me." David's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? What's coming after you?" Rachel hesitated, then looked at him, her face grave. "There's a group, an underground network of investors and criminals who've been pulling the strings behind the scenes. They've been using my company as a front for illegal activities, money laundering, blackmail, you name it. I've been fighting them for years, but they've grown more powerful. Now, they've made it clear that they want control. They've already started making threats, and they won't stop until they have it all." David sat down, trying to process the weight of her words. It felt like a scene from a movie, not real life. "So what does this have to do with me?" Rachel's eyes softened, but there was no warmth in them. "Because, David, I can't do this alone anymore. I need someone I can trust. Someone who knows what it's like to fight for a better life, to fight when everything is stacked against you. You've been overlooked your whole life, but I've been watching you. I know you're more than just a single dad trying to survive." David's chest tightened. He had never been one to see himself as anything special. A father, yes, A survivor, yes, but a fighter in the way Rachel was talking. That was a stretch. I don't know what you're seeing in me, he said, his voice low. I'm just trying to make sure my daughter has a good life. This is a lot. Rachel stepped closer, her voice softening. David, sometimes life doesn't give you a choice. You can keep living the way you are, waiting for something to change. Or you can step into a new world, a world where you can finally have control. You can make a real difference for yourself. And for your daughter. The words hit him harder than he expected. He thought about his daughter, about the life he was trying to build for her. Was this the chance he'd been waiting for? Do you trust me? Rachel asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. David met her gaze, his heart pounding. He didn't know if he could trust her completely. But he knew one thing for sure, his world was changing. And he wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on to the life he had known. He nodded slowly. I'll help you, but you need to tell me everything. No more secrets. Rachel's expression softened, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. I will, but there's one thing you need to understand before we go any further. This is bigger than us. The people we're up against won't stop until they get what they want, and they'll stop at nothing to make sure we fail. David's mind raced, his thoughts swirling with everything she had just told him. The danger, the lies, the web of corruption and deceit. He had always been someone who stayed in the shadows, doing what he had to do to survive. But now, he was being thrust into the heart of something far more dangerous than he could have imagined. Then what's our next step? He asked, his voice steady but uncertain. Rachel gave him a look that made his skin crawl. We find out who's behind this, and we take them down. David's world had become a blur of danger and uncertainty. Since agreeing to help Rachel, his life had taken a turn he wasn't prepared for. He had spent the past few days with her, diving into the murky depths of her company's secrets, gathering information and making plans. But the more he learned, the more he realized how much was at stake. This wasn't just about a corporate takeover. This was about survival. Rachel had introduced him to a small team of trusted allies who had been working with her for years, each one more secretive and guarded than the last. They met in dark rooms, discussing strategies and making plans to expose the network that had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. David had never been a part of anything like this, but the adrenaline kept him going. He couldn't back out, no, not when he was this far in. Tonight, they were meeting at an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. Rachel had insisted it was necessary, that they needed to secure critical information to bring down the people who had been controlling everything. David didn't ask questions anymore. He simply followed. As they entered the building, Rachel's eyes scanned the dark corners of the warehouse. It was cold, empty, save for a few crates stacked in the corner. Stay close, she murmured, her voice low and steady. We don't know who's watching. David nodded, his pulse quickening. He hadn't expected to feel this way, this paranoid, this hunted, but every instinct in his body told him something wasn't right. He had seen the way Rachel had been looking over her shoulder lately, the way she was starting to pull away, leaving him out of certain decisions. It was as though she was hiding something from him. They made their way to the back of the warehouse, where a small table was set up with files and documents spread out in neat piles. Two men stood by the table, their faces shadowed in the dim light. One of them, a man named Lucas, nodded at Rachel. We're ready. Rachel's eyes flicked to David for a moment before she turned to the documents. This is it, she said. The final piece we need. With this, we can expose everything. David stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. As he looked over the files, his mind raced. The names, the dates, the numbers, it was all there. Everything they needed to take down the network. But something felt off. Rachel was acting distant, like she was guarding more than just the information. Lucas spoke again, breaking the silence. We've got a problem. Someone tipped them off. They know we're here. David felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Rachel's expression darkened. It means we need to move fast. If they're onto us, it's only a matter of time before they come for us. We need to finish this tonight. Before David could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. It was the unmistakable sound of boots hitting concrete, heavy and deliberate. Rachel's eyes widened, and she quickly grabbed the papers from the table, shoving them into a bag. We need to go, now, she ordered, her voice cold with urgency. David followed her instinctively, his mind racing as they sprinted toward the exit. But just as they reached the door, something unexpected happened. A shadow moved quickly, blocking their way. David's heart skipped a beat as he realized it was Lucas, the same man who had been working with Rachel. "I'm sorry, Rachel," Lucas said, his voice flat and emotionless. "But this is where it ends." David froze, confusion crashing over him. What was happening? Lucas was supposed to be on their side, wasn't he? Rachel's face twisted with shock and anger. What are you doing?" Lucas stepped forward, pulling a gun from his jacket. "I'm doing what I have to do. You're not going to destroy everything I've worked for. Not after everything we've been through." David's breath caught in his throat. This was a betrayal twist he never saw coming. The man who had been helping Rachel, the one she trusted, was now pointing a gun at them, and there was no way out. Rachel's eyes flashed with fury, but she didn't move. "You don't understand. You never did." Lucas's expression hardened. "No, you don't understand. This was never about the company. It was always about power, Rachel, and now I'm taking control." David's mind was spinning. This wasn't just about money. It was about something far deeper, something darker. Rachel had been right all along. The people she was fighting were dangerous, ruthless, willing to do anything to keep their power. "You don't have to do this," Rachel said, her voice steady, but the tension in her posture was unmistakable. "I can give you what you want. Just put the gun down." But Lucas didn't hesitate. He raised the gun higher. "You had your chance. Now I'm taking mine." David felt his chest tighten as the gun's barrel pointed toward them. His instinct screamed for him to move, to do something, anything, but he stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, everything changed. A loud crack echoed in the warehouse, followed by a rush of wind. Before David could react, Lucas collapsed to the floor, the gun falling from his hand. Rachel's face drained of color as she turned to look at David, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I didn't want it to come to this," she whispered. David stood frozen, his eyes locked on Lucas, who was now motionless on the floor. The sudden turn of events had left him reeling, his heart hammering in his chest. The warehouse felt too quiet, too still after the chaos that had just unfolded. He glanced at Rachel, who was standing a few feet away, her face pale, her hands trembling. For the first time, he saw fear in her eyes. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she took a few slow steps toward Lucas's body, her face a mixture of disbelief and regret. I didn't want this," she whispered, almost to herself. "But I had no choice." David's mind was racing. What had just happened? Lucas was an ally, had been with them, working toward the same goal. But now, everything was in question, and Rachel's reaction was telling. She had been hiding something from him. There was more to this story than he had been told. "Rachel," David began, his voice thick with confusion and anger. "What's going on here? Who did this?" Rachel slowly turned toward him, her face softening with a hint of guilt. "I did," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shot him." David felt the ground beneath him shift. She shot him. He couldn't understand it. He had trusted Rachel, believed in her cause. But now, it was all crumbling. What was she hiding? "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why would you do that?" Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. "Because I had no choice, David. He was going to sell us out. He was part of the network we're trying to take down." Lucas had already turned. He was working for the other side. David's stomach twisted in knots. This was not the Rachel he had come to know. The woman who had once seemed so confident, so driven, was now standing in front of him, confessing to a betrayal of her own, a betrayal he never saw coming. "You didn't tell me," he said, his voice rising with a mix of disbelief and frustration. "You kept this from me. You let me walk into this, believing I was helping you fight for something right. And now you're telling me I was a pawn in your game." Rachel's eyes filled with sorrow. "I never wanted you to be a part of this. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. But the moment you decided to help me, you became involved. I tried to protect you, David. I tried to keep you out of it, but it's too late for that now." David shook his head. "Too late. You've been playing me this whole time." Rachel's gaze hardened. "No, I didn't play you. I needed someone who could trust me, someone who could help me. But you don't understand. If I didn't do this, Lucas would have exposed us all, and that would have been the end of everything. For both of us." David's mind was spinning, the weight of her words sinking in. The betrayal, the lies, it all felt like a tangled web he could barely navigate. He looked down at Lucas's lifeless body, then back at Rachel. "You're telling me I've been working for you this whole time without knowing the truth?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "You've been using me. Rachel took a step forward, her eyes pleading. I wasn't using you. I needed you. But now, there's no going back. The people I've been fighting, they're everywhere. They'd been pulling the strings for years. And now, I'm the one they want. They'll stop at nothing to get what they need. David stood still, his breath shallow. The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in. The fight Rachel had dragged him into was much bigger than he'd ever imagined. There were forces at play, dark, powerful forces that were willing to kill anyone who got in their way. Rachel reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded envelope. She handed it to David. This is the final piece, she said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet desperation. Inside, you'll find everything you need to bring them down, but you have to act fast. They'll be here soon. David took the envelope, his hand shaking slightly. He opened it carefully, revealing a stack of documents, records, names, and dates. His heart pounded as he scanned the pages, the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. These were the people who had been controlling Rachel's company, the ones who had manipulated everything from the shadows. But as he scanned through the documents, one name caught his eye, a name he recognized, the name of someone he never thought he'd see on a list like this. Double quotes, Rachel, ... This person, ... double quotes, he began, his voice thick with disbelief. Before he could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse again. But this time, it wasn't the sound of allies arriving. It was the unmistakable sound of boots on concrete, too many to count. Rachel's face went pale. We don't have time, she said urgently. They're here. David's heart raced. This was it, the final showdown, the moment that would decide everything. He looked at Rachel, his mind made up. I'm in. Whatever happens next, I'm with you. She nodded, her expression hardening with determination. Then let's finish this. The warehouse had grown eerily quiet. The sound of boots had stopped, replaced by the steady, ominous thumping of David's heart in his chest. He stood with Rachel, the weight of the documents heavy in his hands. Everything had led to this moment. The truth was out. But the danger was far from over. The door creaked open, and David's stomach dropped. Shadows filled the threshold, their movements sharp and deliberate. Figures in dark suits stepped inside, their faces hidden beneath the hoods of their jackets. The air felt thick with tension, and David's pulse quickened. Rachel's hand brushed against his. Stay close, she whispered. David's mind raced. They were surrounded. There was no way out. One of the figures stepped forward, his voice cold and low. You really thought you could bring us down, Rachel, after everything we've built? Rachel's face tightened, her eyes steely with defiance. I didn't think. I knew, she replied, her voice unwavering. David's grip on the envelope tightened, and his thoughts flashed back to the documents inside, the names, the connections, the truth about the people who had been pulling the strings all along, the people who had made Rachel's life a nightmare, who had manipulated her every move, the people who would stop at nothing to silence her. The man in front of them smirked. You were always just a tool, Rachel. You and your little toy here, he said, his eyes shifting to David. But now, you've outlived your usefulness. David's breath caught in his throat. Tool. He had known something wasn't right, but he never expected this. The man's words were like a slap to his face. Rachel's expression never faltered. You're wrong. This ends tonight. Before anyone could react, Rachel moved, fast. Her hand shot to her side, pulling out a gun hidden beneath her coat. In a split second, she fired. The man in front of them collapsed to the ground, his body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. David's heart raced as chaos erupted around them. The figures in the warehouse scattered, ducking behind crates and metal pillars. Gunfire rang out, echoing in the vast empty space. Rachel pulled David behind a stack of crates, her body pressed close to his. You need to get out of here, she hissed through gritted teeth, her voice sharp. This wasn't supposed to happen. David shook his head, his mind in a frenzy. I'm not leaving you. We're in this together. But Rachel's face twisted in desperation. You don't understand. They won't stop. You've already seen too much. I can't protect you anymore. David's chest tightened. He had no idea how much danger he was in. No idea who was really on his side anymore. But he couldn't walk away, not now. Not when the stakes were this high. Another figure appeared, moving swiftly and silently. This one wasn't wearing a hood. And when he stepped into the light, David's heart stopped. It was the man whose name had been on the list, the one who had been behind it all. David recognized him immediately. Alex Carter, the millionaire philanthropist who had funded Rachel's company in the early days. the man who had always seemed like an ally till now. David's mind was spinning. So this is it. Alex was the mastermind behind the network Rachel had been fighting all along. You should have stayed away. Rachel, Alex said, his voice calm, almost regretful. But now it's too late. Rachel's eyes flashed with fury. You're a monster. Alex smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Maybe, but I'm still the one with the power here. He stepped closer, his gaze flicking to David. And now, your little friend gets to pay the price for sticking his nose in something he doesn't understand. Rachel's hand shot out, grabbing David by the arm. Run, she shouted, pushing him forward. But before they could make it, Alex's voice rang out, cold and commanding. You think you can escape this? You think you can run from me? David turned, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He couldn't outrun this. He couldn't run from him. There was nowhere to go. And then, everything went still. Rachel spun around, her face contorted with determination. I'm not running anymore, she said, her voice steady. I'm done. In a swift, deadly motion, she aimed her gun at Alex, her eyes never leaving his. This is the end, Alex. There was a long, tense silence. David held his breath, watching as Rachel made her move. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse, louder than any before. But it wasn't Alex who fell, it was Rachel. Time seemed to stop as Rachel's body crumpled to the ground, the gun slipping from her hand. David's legs gave way, and he fell to his knees beside her. No, he whispered, his voice broken. No, Rachel ... Double quotes. Alex stood over her, his eyes cold and calculating. She was never in control. She was always my pawn. David's heart shattered as he held Rachel's lifeless body in his arms, tears streaming down his face. The woman who had pulled him into this world, the woman he had trusted, was gone. But in that moment, something inside David shifted. His grief, his rage, all of it combined into a single, overwhelming force. He wouldn't let Rachel die for nothing, not when he now knew the truth. He had the documents, he had the names, and he had the power to bring them all down. With trembling hands, David reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed the number that had been left for him, the only contact that could help him expose Alex Carter's empire. I'm coming for you, he said, his voice low and dangerous. And this time, he won't get away. David had lost everything: his chance at a normal life, the woman he had trusted, and his innocence in the process. But he had also gained something he never expected, a purpose. Sometimes, in the darkest of times, the only way to survive is to fight back, no matter the cost. The end.